Hey everybody. So today I want oh, excuse me. So today I wanted to go over a couple of things. I think I posted earlier about how our it's not about just necessarily knowing the strategies and being able to do the work, but it's also just kind of convincing students on how to do things a certain way, right? And I think that that's ultimately at the end of it the crux of what really matters because if you've ever spoken to me about this, I think I always kind of say that there's only so many different ways that you can do the same thing, right? So like, everybody generally has very similar strategies. Everybody has very similar things to do, but so at the end of the day, what makes company A different from company B, right? Like what Kaplan, Princeton Review, Test Prep, Prep Expert, Prep Maven, us, every company, kind of has the same ideas when it comes to how to do some these questions. So the only thing that really kind of matters at the end of the day isn't the strategies themselves, but it's the ease in which the strategies can be applied, right? Because when you take away when you filter out all the BS about the 30 things you need to know in order to ace the reading section, or the formulas that you need to know in order to do every question on the math section correctly, and when you get rid of all that kind of stuff, it really does come down to, this is how you need to do the test, and then how can we convince your students to do things a certain way. Okay, so that's really just what it comes down to, and I've mentioned this before in some of my other social media posts. But at the end of the day, most students aren't willing to do it. So then we have to kind of cater or tailor the way that they do it, and simply just giving them questions and saying do it the way that I asked you to do it oftentimes doesn't work because they might try it or they might do it a couple of times. It might work for them, but then, they generally kind of default back to their original way of doing things. And so that's why I'm a big fan of, especially during the sessions and for homework, is to always use the strategies as much as possible. And I remember one of my students, he, great guy, great kid. He's at Brown now. And after he sent me this homework and I was talking to him, he's like, I'm really sorry. I can't remember to do it your way every time. And I'm like, and I know it wasn't intentional. I know like he was really trying. So we would like put things on like I made him write down the steps on a big piece of paper and just tape it to his to the front of his desk so that he can see it every time he looks up, things of that sort. And we're working with like different we're working with like AI to put things together so that we kind of guide students to do things a certain way. And then, if you look at our manuals, a lot of it is just like what's the first thing, do it for me, what's the second thing, and then we have to kind of go through all the steps in order to do it. But when it comes down to like the one-on-one sessions, right, some of the things that we really do to kind of push the idea of the process along is really like, if you look at this page, for example, I've blocked out the answer choices, and this is a words and context question. Pretty straightforward. The questions that you're going to see are generally just medium or hard questions at this point. This is just because this question set is more for our refresher students, so students who have gone through the program are scoring pretty well, but they want to score higher, right? So I covered all the answer choices just because I know from experience that a lot of students, when they do words and context questions, the first thing they do is just kind of look at the answer choices, the words, and then just plug them back into the original sentence, read straight through to see which one makes sense. And you just can't do that because the question, because technically, like a lot of the words do make sense, but there's a specific reason why, each word is the correct word is the correct word, right? So just to kind of recap, the first step that you're going to do is to just read and figure out the clues, right? So identity by clues and triggers. Okay. Come up with your own words. That's the second step. Okay. And then use process of elimination. And I just call that POE. Okay. So let's give this a shot. All right. So let's take a look here. It says, so storm clouds, stars form in clouds like swirls of gas and dust that cannot be touched. Okay, cool. So stars form in cloud like swirls of gas and dust that can't be touched. But astrophysicist Nia Amara believes these formations need not to remain completely blank to researchers. She uses simulation data and sophisticated 3D printers to produce interactive models of these stellar nurseries. Okay, cool. So who or what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the stars and how they form in cloud-like swirls of gas that cannot be touched. What are they saying about it? Well, that she's created She's able to use Imara is able to use simulation data and 3D printers to produce a model that can produce an interactive model of these things. Okay, so can be touched is going to be my word for the blank. I know it's not that that great, like, not that interesting, but at the end of the day, also, I don't want you don't necessarily need to come up with one specific like an SAT word or word for the blank. Just an idea works, like a phrase works, right? And I want to say can be touched just because the author does specifically talk about being touched and then being interactive, right? So there's got to be some sort of like working with this thing. Okay. So now that I have my word for the blank, let's go through the answer choices to see what we can eliminate. So A says repeatable, right? Oh, and by the way, so whenever you're doing your process of elimination questions, right, POE plays a very big role unless you have a massive vocabulary. And I'm not a big fan of making students memorize a ton of words, but if we do have a lot of time with the student, right, so if the student is like a sophomore or junior and we have some time, then we do start to integrate some words and things like that, vocabulary into that. But, let's say that you're like a junior going into your senior year, you don't have a lot of time. Process of elimination plays a very big role. So if I know that the word that I'm looking for is going to mean something similar to can be touched, right? Then I'm going to go through my answer choices. A says repeatable. Now, repeatable, even if you're not 100% sure what that word means, repeat means to do again, right? So that has nothing to do with being able to be touched, okay? Let's take a look at answer choice B. B says explicable. Okay. Now, some students might not know what that word means. If you don't know what a word means, you can't do anything to it. I've said this before, right? If you don't know what a word means, you have to keep it. Okay. And remember, for every answer choice, there's only two choices. You can keep it or throw it away. Okay. If you don't know what the word means, then you got to keep it because it could be the right word or it could not be the right word. Okay. Then let's take a look at answer choice C, regrettable. You should know what that means. I think every student has at some point had some sort of regret, right? And they've had to verbalize that. So the word regrettable doesn't match with can be touched. Okay. And then intangible. Okay. So now, a couple of things, right? Like if you don't know what the word intangible means and you have a 50-50 shot, I'd say pick one between B and D. If you do know what intangible means, then you know that that's the right word. Now, if you don't know what the intangible means, but you've seen the word tangible before, tangent, right? A tangent is a line that touches the circle at one point and exactly one point and then continues on, right? So tangent has to be something close that has to do with geometric shapes, maybe just a line touching the circle, right? A tangent, right? Okay, cool. So that would be my thing, right? It's just, once you have your word for the blank, then you can eliminate what you know. You can eliminate based on using what you know. And then whatever you're left with, you can take a 50-50 shot here. Or you can you can kind of try to come up with your definition of that word based on your experience, right? Okay, so the correct answer for this is intangible. Okay, I'm going to jump over to another question. Oh, there it is. So this one, it looks like something out of a horror film, right? Just a lot of red. And we do this. Some of our tutors actually started to do this because when we're talking to students about doing this, a lot of students read with their eyes but not with their brain. Right. And think about what that means. Right. So reading is just something that we do every day. It's unconsciously we just read. They put a word in front of me, I'm going to read it. Right. I'm in a car driving down the street. I'm reading the street signs. I'm reading the stores. I'm reading everything. But I'm not thinking about what I'm reading. Right? They're just kind of passing through my eyes and I'm just kind of going through. It's skimming, right? So I think a lot of students, they've been trained to kind of read very quickly or read as fast as they can, or they're given the fear that on the tests like the SATs, you need to read as fast as possible. Okay. And, I always I tell students, it's faster to read something once carefully than to read it multiple times quickly. Right? That makes sense. It's pretty logical. Okay. But let's take a look at this, right? So in order to kind of convince the students to read one sentence at a time, and this is more for like a student who's scoring lower, like a 500 to 600 on the reading section, I would actually force them to do it this way because they need to start paraphrasing every sentence or every chunk of information. It's called group reading. but they need to learn how to do that, because once they start doing that, then once they're able to paraphrase what they've read, then now what they've read is now their own, right? They understand it, they own it. And then like in the beginning you might have to stop every so often to after every chunk, but as you start to do this, you start to realize, oh, I don't need to stop every time. My chunks get longer and longer and longer, and to the point where I can read the whole passage one time and I get it. But you need to develop the skill. It's like a muscle. Okay, so let's take a look at question number 14 real quick. Okay, so it says some economists have attributed the increase of adoption of automation technology by firms in the United States in part to the productivity gains firms can achieve by automating tasks previously requiring paid labor. Right, so this is pretty straightforward. Right, so some economists say that automation by tech firms are in part because of the productivity gains in automation that previously required labor. Okay, never mind the spelling and things like that. I'm just kind of trying to get through this pretty quickly, but yeah. So that's what the first sentence says. Okay, now let's take a look at the second sentence. So Darren Asimoglu recently complicated this account by showing that not only that automation productivity gains are often remarkable. Okay, so I actually stopped right there because that is a chunk of information. So Darren complicated things. Oh, yeah, let's say complicated. So this person complicated this account that they were that the productivity gains. That the reason why firms are switching to automation is for the productivity gains. So he complicates that account by showing that productivity gains are often unremarkable. So not a lot of productivity gains. Okay, cool. But, and there's my trigger, that there is a disparity in the U.S. tax code between automation technology and the labor it is normally equivalent to. Okay, so instead he's saying that there, but I'll put the but there. There is a discrepancy between the tax code for automation tech versus labor, physical, or this is physical manual labor. Okay, cool. The tax code classifies automation related technology as depreciating assets. Okay, classified as depreciating assets. Depreciating meaning it goes down in value, right? Meaning that capital expenditure, so spending money, capital, on that technology can reduce a firm's tax burden relative to a firm's tax burden to the relative to its tax burden. Okay, so let's stop here. So using this technology, let's see. This means that the automation tech is can be purchased using capital. Okay, and reduces the firm tax burden. Okay, if equipment was so they're saying that that people are using this tech because it reduces their tax burden, whereas labor doesn't. Okay, so going back to this, so let's just take let's so we're gonna so together, these findings suggest that. So what we've read so far, sorry, I had to pause and then re-record, so I'm a little off kilter. So what we've read so far is that economists thought that automation by tech firms were the increase in automations by tech firms was because of the productivity gains that people get for instead of paying for labor. But then this person, Darren, says that the productivity gains are actually just not that great, and that there might be this might be because there's a discrepancy in the tax code where the automation tech is actually classified as a depreciating asset, which can reduce the firm's tax burden, whereas labor doesn't. Right. So we're going to look for an S choice that kind of fits within that frame. Okay. So and I block out the answer choices because you should definitely do this, because if you're not doing this, what you're doing is you're just kind of scanning. You're not reading with your eyes, right? You're not reading with your brain. And remember, all the things that we've gone over today is with the intention of teaching you how to read with your brain. Okay, that's very, very important. Okay, because the more you do it, the faster you get at it. Your capacity for reading something once and keeping it in your head stays the same, right? Everybody talks about retention. This is how you achieve retention. Okay, so A, the explanation that some economists have offered for U.S. firms increasing adoption of automation technology may be based on an overestimation. No, there's no overestimation. Okay, so that phrase I don't like, because there's no overestimation of the tax benefits, right? It's because they think people think that it's because of productivity gains, but it's probably because it reduces the tax burden. Okay, so there's no overestimation of anything. Okay, and it's especially no overestimation of the tax benefits. Okay. If they said maybe overestimation of productivity gains, okay? B says U.S. firms increasing adoption of automation technology may be driven by more than by the fact that governments indirectly incentivize firms to adopt that technology. So I'm going to say stop right there. So it's driven more by the fact that governments incentivize firms, reducing their tax burdens, than by ongoing benefits that the technology has for the firm. Okay. So this one kind of jives with what we just read. So I'm going to put a check mark. If you're not 100% sure about this, then you can put a squiggly mark next to it. Okay. C. So C says changes to the U.S. tax codes that results in capital expenditures on automation technology being treated the same as the expenditure of labor costs would likely have little. I don't know how, if we change something, how it's going to affect something. It hasn't happened. There's no mention about it. We don't know. There's no proof. Okay. It's kind of like saying, like, what would have happened if I turned left instead of right? You don't know. Okay. Answer choice D says U.S. firms actually tend to experience a decrease in I don't know about, but decrease in productivity as a result of adopting automation technology. But that decrease is overlooked. This is completely off the scope. Okay. So now, so the only thing that we're left with is B. Okay. So remember, when you're doing things like this, right, it's not the strategy, it's the execution of the strategy. Okay. And a lot of the times, like I've said before in other videos, students have a hard time doing things this way because they don't think they need it. And I, like to a large extent, I understand where they're coming from, right? Because most students have spent their entire life reading. They've been reading since they were 3 years old. They can read, but it's not the fact that they can read. This is not a content test. Content only takes you so far. This is a test on how you do things, right? The reason why so many students struggle all across the board on this exam is because they test you, they make you do, you have to do things differently from the way that you're used to doing, and this is what we have to do. All right, have a good day.